It wasn't the 10-figure valuation that made her heart pound, nor the crisp new issue of Forbes with her face on the cover, resting on the passenger seat. No, what made Rosalind Devereux's breath catch in her throat was the sight of the familiar ivy-draped iron gate of the Roth estate. 5 years. 5 years since she'd fled this place in tears, branded as a woman with no ambition. Her ex, Gideon Roth, had predicted she'd amount to nothing more than a footnote in his very important life. Tonight, she wasn't just returning. She was arriving as the headline. The air in the Roth family's formal dining room was always thick with the scent of roasted duck old money and unspoken expectations. It was a suffocating perfume, one that Rosalind Devereux had been trying to ignore for the better part of 2 years. She sat beside her boyfriend, Gideon Roth, a man sculpted by generational wealth and tailored by Savile Row. He was handsome, charming, and possessed a career trajectory in his father's investment firm, Roth & Sons, that was as straight and predictable as the part in his hair. Tonight was the annual family dinner, celebrating the firm's quarterly successes. Around the sprawling mahogany table sat Gideon's father, Corbin Roth, a man with a hawk's gaze and a shark's smile. His mother Beatrice was a portrait of quiet elegance and steely judgment. And then there were the assorted aunts, uncles, and cousins, a chorus of condescension dressed in designer labels. Gideon tells us you're still pursuing your art. Corbin began the word art dangling in the air like a piece of spoiled fruit. He took a slow sip of a deep red Chateau Margaux that cost more than Roz's monthly rent. Roz forced a polite smile. I'm a digital artist and designer. I specialize in creating intuitive user experiences and interface designs. A cousin named Portia, who had recently secured a plum marketing position at Christie's auction house through sheer nepotism, let out a delicate laugh. Oh, so you make the little buttons and things on websites look pretty. How charming. Gideon shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He was supposed to be her defender, her partner. Instead, he offered a weak, placating smile to his family. It's more complex than that, Portia. Roz is very talented. Talent is one thing, Gideon Corbin interjected, setting his wine glass down with a definitive click. Ambition is another entirely. Roth & Sons just facilitated the multi-billion-dollar acquisition of a robotics firm. The men who run it, they have ambition. They are building empires, shaping the future. They aren't doodling. The word hit Roz like a physical blow. Doodling. It was the ultimate dismissal, a contemptuous wave of the hand that reduced her passion, her skill, her entire world into a child's mindless pastime. She spent countless hours, often late into the night, not just making things pretty, but architecting seamless digital journeys. She studied cognitive psychology, color theory, and user flow with an academic rigor that would rival any business degree. Her work was a complex blend of art and science, and he had just called it doodling. She looked at Gideon, her eyes pleading with him to say something to defend the countless hours he'd seen her pour into her portfolio, the passion he'd claimed to admire. Gideon cleared his throat. Father, what I think you mean is that Roz's career path is less traditional. What I mean, Corbin said, his voice dropping to a low, cutting timbre, is that it's not a career path at all. It's a hobby. A pleasant diversion until you're ready to take on the more serious role of being Gideon's wife, raising our grandchildren and managing a household. That is a respectable ambition for a woman. This digital finger painting is not. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye was on Roz. She felt her face flush with a heat that was part shame, part white-hot fury. She had poured her heart out to Gideon about her dreams. She wanted to start her own design consultancy to revolutionize how people interact with technology, to create digital spaces that were not just functional but beautiful and humane. And he had said nothing. He had let his father tear her dreams to shreds, and offered not a single word of genuine defense. He just sat there looking pained, as if he were the victim of this social discomfort. That was the moment the illusion shattered. She wasn't his partner. She was his accessory. An ornament he was willing to tolerate as long as she didn't clash with the decor of his predetermined life. Her ambition wasn't the problem. The problem was that her ambition wasn't his ambition. It didn't serve the Roth dynasty. Slowly, deliberately, Roz placed her napkin on the table. She stood up, her movements calm and precise, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her. "Thank you for the dinner, Mr. Roth," she said, her voice steady and clear, ringing with a finality that startled everyone. "You've given me a great deal to think about." She turned her gaze to Gideon. The hurt in her eyes was so profound, it was almost a physical thing. "Gideon, walk me out." It wasn't a request. It was a command. He followed her out of the oppressive dining room and into the grand marbled foyer. "Roz, I'm so sorry." He began, his voice a desperate whisper. "You know how he is. He's old-fashioned." He didn't mean it. He meant every single word she replied, her back still to him as she pulled on her coat. "And so did you." "What? That's not true." "I think your work is amazing." She finally turned to face him, and he flinched at the cold fire in her eyes. Do you really think it's amazing, or do you think it's a charming and talented hobby? Be honest, Gideon. Have you ever even once seen my ambition as being on the same level as yours, as being real? He opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't lie, not now. The truth was written all over his handsome, conflicted face. He saw her as a wonderful, creative girlfriend. He did not see her as a peer. I want what's best for us," he stammered. "There is no us anymore," Roz said the words tasting like ash. "I will not spend my life with someone who thinks my dreams are just doodles. You think I have no ambition? Fine. Stay here in your gilded cage and watch me." She pulled her keys from her purse. "I'll have my things out by tomorrow afternoon." Without another word, she opened the heavy oak door and walked out into the cold night, leaving Gideon standing alone in the cavernous foyer, the echoes of his father's laughter trickling out from the dining room. The door clicked shut, a sound that marked the end of a chapter and the explosive beginning of a war she now had to wage not against the Roths, but against the doubt they had so cruelly planted in her heart. The first week after the breakup was a blur of cardboard boxes and unshed tears. Roz moved out of the sleek, minimalist apartment she'd shared with Gideon and into a cramped third-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that buzzed with genuine life rather than the sterile hum of wealth. The apartment was small, the paint was peeling, and the plumbing groaned like a dying beast, but the light was good. That's what she told herself. The light was good. She'd packed her life into 27 boxes, but the heaviest thing she carried was Corbin Roth's voice in her head, a venomous loop playing on repeat, a hobby. Digital finger painting, no ambition. For a month, she let herself grieve. She worked her freelance gigs with a mechanical efficiency, her creativity dulled by a thick fog of self-doubt. Was he right? Was she just a girl, with a fanciful, unprofitable dream. The world of high finance, of mergers and acquisitions. That was the world of ambition. Her world of pixels and prototypes suddenly felt small, frivolous, and crushingly lonely. One rainy Tuesday, drowning her sorrows in a lukewarm coffee at a local haunt called The Daily Grind, she was staring blankly at her laptop screen. On it was a personal project, a design she'd been tinkering with for months. It was more than just a website or an app interface. It was a concept for an entire operating system, a digital environment built not around files and folders, but around ideas and creative flow. It was intuitive, organic, and beautiful. It was everything she believed technology could be. It was also, she thought with a bitter pang, the very definition of a doodle. That's a hell of a UI tree. You're building a proprietary OS from the ground up. The voice, tinged with a faint Irish accent, startled her. She looked up to see a man with a mess of auburn hair, kind eyes, and a T-shirt for a long-dead programming language. He gestured with his own mug towards her screen. "Sorry to pry," he said with a disarming grin. "But you don't see a design architecture that elegant outside of a major R&D lab. And even then, it's usually uglier." Roz blinked. "You understand what you're looking at?" "I should hope so." "I'm a coder," he said, pulling up a chair. "Finian O'Connell. But everyone calls me Finn. Rosalind Devereux. Roz." For the next hour, they didn't just talk. They connected. Finn wasn't just a coder. He was a systems architect, a digital philosopher. He saw the genius in her design that Gideon had never been able to comprehend. He didn't see doodles. He saw a revolution. He pointed to her screen, his finger tracing the elegant lines of her flowcharts. This isn't just a skin," he said, his voice filled with a reverence that made her sit up straighter. "This is a whole new language for human-computer interaction. It's contextual. It anticipates the user's creative process. A writer's desktop would look and function differently from a musician's or a filmmaker's, right? It adapts." "Exactly," Roz exclaimed, a spark igniting within her for the first time in weeks. "It's meant to be a seamless extension of the creative mind, not a digital filing cabinet." Finn leaned back, his eyes wide with excitement. This could change everything. For artists, designers, programmers, everyone. It's what Apple used to be about before they got obsessed with margins. This is pure innovation. He looked at her, his expression deadly serious. "Who are you building this for?" Roz hesitated. "No one. It's just a project." Finn stared at her, a knowing look on his face. "Let me guess. You showed this to some suit and tie type, and they told you it was a cute hobby." The accuracy of his statement was so startling, it felt like he'd read her mind. A sad, wry smile touched her lips. "Something like that." "Then the suit was an idiot," Finn said simply. "Roz, this isn't a project. This is a company. This is the next big thing. The only thing missing," he added with a hopeful grin, "is someone to build the engine that makes your beautiful car run." That coffee meeting turned into another, and then another. They met every day, their energy infectious. Finn's technical brilliance was the perfect counterpart to Roz's visionary design. He saw the code behind her colors, the algorithms behind her aesthetics. She, in turn, was able to give his abstract programming a stunning user-facing form. They were two halves of a single, brilliant idea. One evening, working late in her tiny apartment, surrounded by whiteboards covered in Finn's frantic code, and her elegant wireframes. He stopped and looked at her. "We need to do this for real, Roz. Quit the freelance stuff. Go all in." The fear the voice of Corbin Roth crept back in. "All in. Finn. We have nothing. No money, no office, no connections." "We have this," he said, tapping the central whiteboard, where the name they'd chosen was written in bold letters. Etheros. Thus, connections can be made. Money can be found. But an idea like this only comes along once. He could see the doubt warring with hope in her eyes. "Look," he said softly. 5 years from now, do you want to be designing pop-up ads for a living? Wondering what might have been? Or do you want to be on stage at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference, making them all look like they're selling calculators? His belief in her was a balm on the wound Gideon had left. He didn't just see her talent, he saw her ambition and raised it. He wasn't afraid of it. He was inspired by it. "Okay," she whispered the word, feeling momentous. "Okay, Finn. Let's build an empire." They sealed the deal not with a handshake, but with a shared greasy pizza eaten on the floor of her apartment at 2 a.m. They pooled their meager savings, which amounted to just enough to cover rent and ramen for 6 months. They officially incorporated Etheros LLC. Roz was CEO, the visionary. Finn was CTO, the architect. Their office was her living room. Their boardroom was her tiny kitchen table. They worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning, shared conviction. The fog of self-doubt that had clouded Roz's mind began to burn away, replaced by the white-hot intensity of creation. She was no longer just doodling. She was building her weapon, her masterpiece, her rebuttal. The world had told her she had no ambition. Now she was building it from scratch, one line of code, and one perfect pixel at a time. The next 18 months were a brutal, exhilarating, and often desperate marathon. The glamour of the tech startup narrative was a myth. Their reality was a relentless grind. Days bled into nights, fueled by an endless stream of instant noodles and the cheapest coffee they could find. Roz's apartment, once a sanctuary, became a chaotic pressure cooker of innovation. Wires snaked across the floor. Whiteboards covered every wall, and the hum of overworked laptops was their constant soundtrack. Roz's role as CEO was less about corner offices and power lunches, and more about being the chief fundraiser, marketer, janitor, and therapist. While Finn wrestled with the colossal task of building the Etheros kernel, Roz was in the trenches of the business world, a world she was learning to navigate on the fly. She created a stunning pitch deck, a masterclass in visual storytelling that brought Etheros to life. But the venture capitalists of Sand Hill Road were a tough audience. They were men much like Corbin Roth, accustomed to pitches from Stanford graduates in fleece vests, not from an unknown female artist with no formal business training. The rejections were brutal and frequent. "The design is beautiful, Ms. Devereaux, but the moat isn't deep enough." One VC told her, dismissing their unique architecture as a feature, not a platform. An entire operating system. The overhead is astronomical. Why not just build an app? Said another, failing to grasp the revolutionary scope of their vision. One meeting was particularly galling. After she'd poured her heart out for an hour, the lead partner at the firm leaned back and said, "My daughter loves to draw on her iPad. It's great you're making a career out of it." He passed on the investment. Each no was a fresh jab, a painful echo of Gideon's dismissal. Roz would come back to the apartment, her face a mask of disappointment, and Finn would wordlessly hand her a mug of tea, his steady presence, a silent promise that he was still all in. They lived on the brink of financial collapse. They paid their server bills with credit cards, juggling balances, and praying for a breakthrough. The breakthrough came not from a VC, but from a blog. Roz spent weeks cultivating a relationship with a writer at TechCrunch, not by pitching, but by offering genuine insights on design trends. Intrigued, the writer, a respected industry voice named Jordan Lee, finally agreed to a demo. It was a nerve-wracking video call. Their prototype was buggy, held together by what Finn called digital duct tape and prayers. But it was enough. Jordan saw what the VCs had missed. He saw the magic. The article came out on a Thursday morning with the headline, "Forget Apps. EtherOS is designing the soul of your next computer." The effect was instantaneous. Their server, which they hosted on a budget plan, crashed within minutes from the influx of traffic. Their email inboxes exploded. Developers wanted to know about the API. Designers hailed Roz as a visionary. And most importantly, the VCs who had shown them the door a month ago were suddenly calling their tone miraculously changed. They decided to pursue a modest seed, round enough to hire a small team and get a real office, but not so much that they'd lose control. This brought them to Brent Holloway. Brent was exactly what they thought they needed. He had a solid resume from a mid-tier software company and a quiet confidence that was reassuring. He was a senior engineer meant to take some of the load off Finn so he could focus on the core architecture. Brent seemed to worship their vision, constantly praising Roz's design sense and Finn's coding prowess. He fit in perfectly with their small, scrappy team. With the seed money, they moved into a small, open-plan office in a converted warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. For the first time, EtherOS felt real tangible. They were a real company, with real employees and a real future. Roz allowed herself a small moment of triumph. She was doing it. She was really doing it. One evening, as they were all packing up, Brent lingered by Roz's desk. "I have to say, Roz," he began, his tone earnest, "it's incredible what you're building. I ran into an old acquaintance the other day, Gideon Roth, from Roth & Sons." Roz's blood ran cold. "You know Gideon?" "We moved in the same circles for a bit. He mentioned he knew you. Said you were incredibly creative. He seemed really proud, actually. Told me to tell you he's been following your success in the press and he's cheering you on." The words were meant to be kind, a bridge to a past she had tried to bury. But they felt manipulative, a subtle poison. Gideon, proud, cheering her on. The man who had sat silently while his father called her life's work, doodling. It was absurd. It was a lie. But why would Brent relay it? She chalked it up to an awkward attempt at making conversation, but a seed of unease was planted. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the work. They were pushing for a stable beta launch, and the pressure was immense. Finn was living at the office, sleeping on a couch and subsisting on takeout. Roz was a whirlwind of motion, coordinating everything, her ambition, now a roaring fire. The unease about Brent returned a few weeks later. Finn came to her, his face pale and drawn. "There's a problem," he said, his voice low. "A big one." He led her to his workstation and pulled up lines of code. "This is the core of our contextual AI, the predictive engine that makes EtherOS special. It's my most complex work." He then pulled up another window, and this is the same code, slightly rewritten, being uploaded nightly to an external encrypted server. Roz stared at the screen. What does that mean? It means someone is stealing our soul, Finn said, his voice grim. And the access logs lead back to one machine. He looked at her, his eyes full of fury and betrayal. Brent Holloway's. The first bite of success hadn't come from a competitor or a market downturn. It had come from within. Their first trusted hire, the man who had pretended to be their biggest fan, was systematically gutting their company from the inside out. And Roz had a sickening feeling she knew who had sent him. The ghost of Gideon Roth was no longer just a memory. It was an active threat. The discovery of Brent's betrayal sent a shockwave through their small company. It was a cold, calculated act that felt deeply personal. Roz and Finn convened in their makeshift conference room, a corner of the office with a whiteboard and 2 beanbag chairs, their minds reeling. We fire him. Immediately. We get a lawyer and we sue him into the ground, Finn said, pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. The Irish lilt in his voice, usually so charming, was now sharp with anger. Roz, however, was strangely calm. The initial shock had subsided, replaced by an icy resolve. This was a corporate chess game, and raw emotion was a liability. The image of Gideon, his handsome face feigning pride while he likely orchestrated this sabotage, flooded her mind. This wasn't just Brent. This was a message. No, she said, her voice quiet but firm. If we fire him now, he'll disappear, and so will the proof of who he's working for. He's just the pawn, Finn. I want the king. What are you suggesting? We just let him keep showing up. Let him keep stealing our work, Finn asked aghast. We don't let him, Roz clarified. We watch him. We need to know the scope of the damage, and more importantly, where that data is going. Who is he feeding it to? She looked at Finn. Can you build a trap? A slow, dangerous smile spread across Finn's face. The architect of Ether OS was also a master of digital defense. Oh, I can build him a 5-course meal of beautiful, delicious, completely fake code. I can track every keystroke, every packet he sends. By the time I'm done, I'll know what brand of toothpaste he uses. Thus began a tense 2-week charade. On the surface, it was business as usual. Roz and Finn treated Brent with the same professional warmth, a feat of acting that deserved an Oscar. Brent, oblivious, continued his work, believing he was the smartest man in the room. But beneath the surface, a silent war was being waged. Finn worked tirelessly, creating a honeypot, a separate, isolated section of their network, filled with convincing but ultimately useless code. It was a digital siren song designed to lure Brent in and record his every move. Roz, meanwhile, engaged a boutique law firm specializing in intellectual property theft, briefing them in secret. The trap worked perfectly. Brent took the bait, downloading terabytes of the fake EtherOS code. Finn's tracking software lit up like a Christmas tree, tracing the data packets on a journey that ended at a server registered to a shell corporation. It took their lawyer less than 24 hours to pierce the corporate veil. The shell corporation was funded by a subsidiary holdings company owned by Roth & Sons. The confirmation was a cold knot in Roz's stomach. It was Gideon, or his father. It didn't matter which. They saw her not as a competitor to be respected, but as a nuisance to be crushed. They couldn't stand the thought of her succeeding on her own terms, so they'd sent a serpent into her garden to poison it from within. The day of the confrontation was grey and overcast, mirroring Roz's mood. She called Brent into the conference room. Finn stood by her side, his arms crossed, a silent, imposing presence. Brent Roz began her tone neutral. "We need to discuss your contributions to the project." Brent smiled, settling into his chair. "Of course. I think we're making great progress." Roz slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of the server logs showing the data transfer from his machine to the Roth-owned server. Brent's face went white. The color drained from his cheeks as if a plug had been pulled. He stared at the paper, his confident facade crumbling into dust. I don't know what this is," he stammered, his eyes darting between Roz and Finn. "Don't you?" Roz's voice was still quiet, but now it was laced with steel. "Let me help you. That's a log of you committing corporate espionage and felony IP theft. For the last 3 months, you have been systematically stealing our source code and feeding it to a competitor. A competitor, I might add, that we have a very personal history with." Brent swallowed hard, speechless. "You came to us under false pretenses." Roz continued, her anger finally beginning to surface. "You preyed on our trust. You were a cancer in this company. Did Gideon Roth really think I was that stupid, that I would just roll over and let him gut my life's work after he'd already tried to gut my spirit?" The mention of Gideon's name made Brent flinch. The game was up. "He offered me a director-level position." Brent whispered his confession, barely audible. "A guarantee. He said you were a flash in the pan, that you'd be bankrupt in a year. He just wanted the core tech." Finn took a step forward. "He wanted our soul, and you tried to sell it to him." Roz held up a hand, stopping Finn. She looked at Brent, not with hatred, but with a kind of pity. He was just a weak man who had made a terrible choice. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "You're going to sign this confession detailing everything. Who hired you, what you were promised, what you delivered. Then you're going to give us your laptop and your phone, and you are going to walk out that door. If you do that, we will not immediately press criminal charges." She paused, letting the weight of the word immediately hang in the air. "But we will keep them as an option. If we ever hear your name again, if you work in this industry again, if you so much as jaywalk in front of this building, we will rain down a legal firestorm on you that will make you wish you'd just stayed at your boring mid-tier job. Do you understand?" Nodding numbly, Brent signed the confession. He didn't even read it. He gathered his things in a small box, a walk of shame past the few employees who watched in confused silence. As he walked out the door, a defeated and broken man, Roz felt no triumph, only a grim satisfaction. She had excised the cancer, but the ordeal had changed her. The naive artist was gone, replaced by a battle-hardened CEO. She now understood that the business world wasn't just about having the best idea. It was a battlefield, and she had just won her first major skirmish. The betrayal meant to destroy her had instead forged her ambition into something sharper and more resilient. She was no longer just fighting for her dream. She was fighting for her company's survival, and she was ready for the next battle. The fallout from the Brent Holloway affair left a scar on Etheros. The team was shaken, and the sense of intimate trust was temporarily fractured. But instead of letting it break them, Roz used it as a rallying cry. She gathered her small team, and without revealing the personal connection to Gideon, laid out the facts of the corporate espionage attempt. She was honest about their vulnerability and their victory. They tried to steal from us because they know what we have is revolutionary. She told them, her voice ringing with conviction. They are scared of us, and they should be. This doesn't slow us down. This pours gasoline on the fire. We are going to launch a product so brilliant, so undeniable, that no one can ever touch us again." Her speech worked. The team, now fiercely loyal, rallied behind her with a renewed sense of purpose. The grind intensified, but this time it was fueled by defiance. 6 months later, they had a product. The EtherOS Beta was stable, elegant, and breathtaking. It was everything Roz had dreamed of in her cramped apartment, and more. It learned, it adapted, it was less an operating system and more a creative partner. But a great product was useless without a grand entrance. They needed a stage. They needed to make a deafening noise. They set their sights on the biggest stage in the startup world, TechCrunch Disrupt, in San Francisco. Getting into the startup battlefield competition was a long shot, but Roz's tenacity paid off. Her application, complete with a video demo that was a work of art in itself, captured the judges' attention. They were in. The 2 months leading up to Disrupt were a blur of frantic preparation. Finn and the engineering team worked around the clock, squashing bugs and optimizing performance. Roz, meanwhile, dedicated herself to the pitch. She practiced it hundreds of times in the shower on the subway, in front of a mirror to her team, to an empty room. She wasn't just memorizing lines, she was internalizing the story, the mission. This wasn't just a presentation. It was the culmination of years of struggle, betrayal, and unyielding belief. It was her definitive answer to Corbin Roth, to Gideon, to every VC who had ever called her work cute. The day of the competition, the backstage area of the conference hall was a hive of nervous energy. Young founders in hoodies rehearsed their pitches, their faces pale with anxiety. Roz felt a strange sense of calm descend over her. She looked out at the massive audience, the flashing lights, the intimidating panel of judges. A Mount Rushmore of tech royalty, including partners from Sequoia Capital and Andreessen Horowitz. She wasn't scared. She was ready. When they called EtherOS, she walked onto the stage, a stark contrast to the sea of nervous young men. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, her presence commanding. Finn stood by the demo station, giving her a reassuring nod. "We've been interacting with our computers the same way for 30 years. She began, her voice clear and strong, filling the auditorium. With files, folders, and rigid applications. It's a system designed for accountants, a digital filing cabinet. But what if you're not an accountant? What if you're a musician, a filmmaker, a poet, a designer? Your mind doesn't work in files and folders. Your mind works in ideas. Your technology should, too." For the next 6 minutes, she held the audience captive. She didn't just describe Etheros. She painted a picture of a new creative future. She spoke of fluidity of intuition, of technology that served the human spirit instead of constraining it. When Finn ran the demo, audible gasps rippled through the crowd. The OS flowed like water, transforming its interface in real time as he switched from a writing task to music composition to 3D modeling. It was seamless. It was magic. She ended the pitch with a photo of her first tiny apartment on the screen. 2 years ago, EtherOS was just an idea in a cramped room, born out of the belief that our tools shouldn't just be functional, but also beautiful and inspiring. Today, we're inviting you to join us in building the future of creativity. The applause was thunderous. The judges, usually stone-faced and critical, were visibly impressed. The Q&A was intense, but Roz was flawless. She knew every metric, every technical detail, every market projection. She answered with the authority of a founder who had lived and breathed her company every single day. When it was over, they went backstage, their bodies trembling with adrenaline. They didn't have to wait long. The moment they stepped off stage, they were swarmed, not just by press, but by the VCs. The same firms that had rejected her were now elbowing each other out of the way. To get to her, their business cards extended like peace offerings. The partner from Sequoia Capital, a woman named Annabelle Croft, who was a legend in the valley, cut through the crowd. "That wasn't a pitch, Ms. Devereaux," she said, her eyes sharp and appraising. "That was a manifesto. My office, tomorrow, 9 a.m. They didn't win the competition that day. That went to a predictable AI data mining company. But it didn't matter. They had won the war. The TechCrunch article that night ran with the headline, "EtherOS loses the battle, wins the war, stealing the show at Disrupt." The next morning in Sequoia Capital's famously understated offices on Sand Hill Road, Annabelle Croft didn't mince words. "We've reviewed your tech, your team, and the attempt from Roth & Sons to steal your IP," she said, confirming Roz's suspicion that in the valley secrets were currency. "We're not just interested. We want to lead your Series A. We're offering $25 million on a $200 million valuation." Roz and Finn looked at each other, stunned into silence. The numbers were astronomical beyond their wildest dreams. It was validation on a scale she could barely comprehend. Roz took a deep breath, the image of Corbin Roth's smug face flashing in her mind. "Thank you, Annabelle. That's a very generous offer." She paused, a newfound confidence settling over her. But given the clear market enthusiasm and the hostile interest from established players, we believe a $300 million valuation is more reflective of our position. Finn's eyes widened, but he said nothing, trusting her completely. Annabelle Croft stared at Roz for a long moment, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I knew I liked you," she said. "Welcome to Sequoia Capital, Miss Devereaux." Walking out into the California sunshine, Roz felt a sense of vertigo. In 48 hours, they had gone from a scrappy bootstrapping startup to one of the most talked-about, well-funded companies in Silicon Valley. She hadn't just proven her ambition was real. She had put a price tag on it, and that price tag had 9 figures. The roar she had made on that stage was still echoing, and it was loud enough to be heard all the way back on the East Coast. The Sequoia Capital investment transformed EtherOS from a promising startup into a powerhouse. The money was a weapon. They hired the best engineers in the world, poaching talent from Google, Apple, and Microsoft. They moved into a sprawling, light-filled campus in Palo Alto that was less an office and more a testament to Roz's design philosophy, a space built for creativity and collaboration. Roz Devereaux was no longer just a CEO. She was a phenomenon. She was profiled in Wired, gave a keynote at Web Summit in Lisbon, and became a leading voice on the intersection of technology and art. She was lauded for her vision, her grit, and her impeccable style. The woman who was once told she had no ambition was now the poster child for a new kind of tech mogul, one with soul. With the company's explosive growth came immense pressure. But Roz thrived in it. She was in her element, making high-stakes decisions, guiding her team, and relentlessly pushing her vision forward. Her partnership with Finn deepened into a seamless alliance of trust and mutual respect. They were in every sense of the word, a team. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, a year after the TechCrunch triumph, that the ghost of her past finally materialized. Her assistant, a hyper-efficient young man named Owen, buzzed her on the intercom. Roz, there's a Mr. Gideon Roth in the lobby to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal. Roz froze her hand, hovering over her mouse. Gideon. Here, in her glass-walled office, in the heart of the empire she had built. For a moment, she was tempted to have security escort him out. But then a different impulse took over. Curiosity. And a cold, clinical desire to close this chapter once and for all. Send him in, Owen, she said, her voice betraying none of the turmoil she felt. When Gideon walked in, she was struck by how little he had changed, and yet how different he seemed. He still wore the expensive suit, the perfect hair, the air of privilege. But in the context of her world, a world of genuine innovation and self-made success, he looked small, an artifact from another era. Roz, he said, his voice laced with an unfamiliar mixture of awe and nervousness. This place, it's incredible. What you've built is... Wow. Hello, Gideon, she replied, her tone cool and professional. She didn't stand. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. What can I do for you? He sat down, looking deeply uncomfortable. I know it's been a long time. I wanted to apologize for how things ended, for my family, for everything. Apology noted, she said, her expression unreadable. Was there anything else? Her directness clearly flustered him. Well, yes, I've been following your success. EtherOS is revolutionary, truly. And I was thinking, my firm, Roth & Sons, we're moving more into the tech space. We're looking to invest in visionary companies. I've managed to convince my father that what you're doing is the future. We'd like to be a part of it. We're prepared to make a significant offer to be part of your next funding round. Roz leaned back in her chair, a slow, incredulous smile touching her lips. It wasn't a real smile. It was the smile of a predator that has just seen a particularly foolish rabbit wander into its den. Let me see if I have this straight, she said, her voice dangerously soft. After your father called my work doodling, after you sat there and let him, after you sent one of your cronies, Brent Holloway, to try and steal my intellectual property and sabotage my company from the inside. You are now sitting in my office in the company you tried to destroy, asking to invest in it. Gideon's face flushed a deep, mottled red. I didn't know my father was going to go that far with Brent. That was his initiative, a misguided old-school tactic. When I found out, I was furious. Were you? Roz asked, her eyebrows raised in mock curiosity. Were you furious, Gideon? Or were you just furious that he got caught? She leaned forward, the full force of her power and anger finally unleashed. You didn't believe in me when I had nothing but a dream. You stood by and watched your family try to tear me down. You thought my ambition was a joke. And now that my doodle is valued at over $1 billion, you come knocking wanting a piece of the pie. You don't want to invest in me, Gideon. You want to buy my forgiveness. You want to attach your name to my success so you can tell yourself you were a part of it all along. She stood up, walking around the desk to look out the floor-to-ceiling window at the sprawling campus below. You see all this? She said, not looking at him. I built this. I built it with my own hands, with my own ideas, with my partner Finn, who saw a queen when you saw a court jester. I built it on a foundation of sleepless nights, relentless work, and the unwavering belief that what I was doing mattered. There is no room in this company for people who don't share that belief. There is no room for ghosts. She turned to face him, her eyes as hard and brilliant as diamonds. So no, Gideon. You will not be investing in my company. Not now, not ever. Your money is worthless here. Your apology is 5 years too late and $1 billion short. She walked to her office door and held it open. I believe you know the way out. Gideon stood there for a long moment, his face a mask of humiliation and shock. He had come expecting to leverage his name and money, the two things that had always worked for him. He had discovered to his horror that he was in a place where they had no value. He walked out of her office without another word, a man utterly defeated by a force he could not comprehend. As the door clicked shut, Roz didn't feel a rush of victory. She felt a profound sense of peace. The ghost was gone. She had faced him not as a wounded ex-girlfriend, but as the queen of her own empire, and she had banished him for good. The final shackle to her past had been broken. The call from Forbes came on a crisp autumn afternoon. They wanted to feature her on the cover of their upcoming 30 Under 30 issue, or rather a special edition. They were creating the new Tech Titans. They weren't just putting her on a list, they were giving her the entire cover. Rosalind Devereux, the billionaire tech queen, who redefined ambition. The day of the photo shoot, Roz stood in a cavernous studio surrounded by lights, cameras, and a small army of stylists and assistants. They wanted to dress her in a severe power suit, a cliché of female executive strength. Roz politely refused. Instead, she chose a simple, elegant dress in a deep, vibrant blue, the signature color of Ether OS. She wasn't playing a role. She was simply being herself. As she sat there, the photographer calling out instructions, her mind drifted back. She thought of the oppressive dining room at the Roth estate, the sting of Corbyn's words, the hollow look in Gideon's eyes. She thought of her tiny, cramped apartment, the taste of cheap coffee, the thrill and terror of starting something from nothing. She thought of Finn, her unwavering partner, whose belief in her had been the catalyst for everything. She thought about the meaning of ambition. For the Roths, it was a rigid, linear path paved with money and power. It was about acquisition, about dominance. They had tried to force her into their definition, and when she'd refused, they had tried to break her. But she had forged her own definition. Her ambition wasn't about money, though she now had more than she could ever spend. It was about creation. It was about building something beautiful and meaningful, something that would change the world for the better. It was about proving to herself, and only to herself, that her vision mattered. The money, the fame, the cover of Forbes, they weren't the goal. They were byproducts of a passion she had refused to surrender. A few weeks later, a package arrived at her office. It was an advance copy of the magazine. There she was on the cover. Her expression wasn't smiling or smug. It was calm, confident, and direct. Her eyes seemed to look right through the lens, seeing something far beyond the present moment. That evening, she didn't go to a lavish party or a fancy restaurant to celebrate. Instead, she drove. She drove through the darkening streets until she found herself in a familiar, wealthy suburb. She parked her sleek new Lucid Air sedan across the street from an imposing ivy-draped iron gate. The Roth estate. Lights blazed in the windows. She could imagine the scene inside another formal dinner, another bottle of expensive wine, another quarter of predictable success. She wondered if they had seen the magazine. She wondered what they would say. She took the copy of Forbes from the passenger seat and just looked at it, the cool night air washing over her. There was no anger left, no bitterness, just a quiet sense of completion. She didn't need to go inside. She didn't need them to see her. Their opinion was irrelevant. She had once fled this place in tears, a girl branded as having no ambition. She returned tonight, a woman who had built an empire from the ashes of their condescension. She hadn't done it to spite them. She had done it for herself, and that was the sweetest victory of all. Starting the car, she pulled away from the curb, leaving the Roth estate shrinking in her rearview mirror. She didn't look back. She was driving toward the future, a future she had designed herself on her own terms. The cover of Forbes was not an ending. It was a milestone on a journey that was still just beginning. Rosalind Devereux had her own definition of ambition, and it was limitless. Rosalind's story is a powerful reminder that ambition isn't a one-size-fits-all concept defined by others. It's a fire that burns within you, and you are the only one who can choose how brightly it burns. She took the world's dismissal and used it as fuel, transforming doubt into a dynasty. Her victory wasn't just in the billion-dollar valuation or the magazine cover. It was in staying true to her own vision against all odds. What did you think of Roz's incredible journey from heartbroken artist to unstoppable tech titan? Have you ever had someone doubt your dreams? Let us know your story in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story inspired you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story of incredible triumph.